The photograph shows nothing but desert. A dry lake bed, pale and cracked, stretching toward a ring of brown mountains under a merciless Nevada sun. No fences visible, no buildings, just heat shimmer and dust. And yet, if you drive toward that empty ground on the wrong road, men in unmarked trucks will appear within minutes. They carry rifles. They do not identify themselves. They will tell you to turn around, and you will. This is Area 51, a place the United States government did not officially admit existed until 2013, despite the fact that pilots, engineers, and conspiracy theorists had been arguing about it for over half a century. So what actually happens behind that line in the sand? The honest answer is more interesting and stranger than most people expect. Because the truth isn't a single secret. It's layers of them. Some declassified, some still sealed, and some that may never come out at all. To understand what Area 51 really is, you have to go back to 1955 and to a problem the American military didn't know how to solve. The Cold War was accelerating. The Soviet Union had detonated its first hydrogen bomb, and the United States had almost no reliable way to see what was happening deep inside Soviet territory. Satellites capable of surveillance didn't exist yet. Existing aircraft couldn't fly high enough or far enough to photograph missile sites and air bases without being shot down. The Central Intelligence Agency turned to Lockheed's Secretive Engineering Division, known internally as Skunk Works, and to its chief designer, Kelly Johnson. Johnson proposed a radical aircraft, the U-2, a glider-like plane built to cruise above 70,000 feet, higher than any Soviet interceptor or missile could reach at the time. But a plane like that needed somewhere to be tested, somewhere flat, remote, and completely empty of witnesses. Johnson's team scouted the American Southwest by air and found it. A dry lake bed called Groom Lake, tucked inside a vast stretch of federal land already used for nuclear testing, in the high desert north of Las Vegas. The government quietly annexed the surrounding land in 1955. On maps, the region was already divided into numbered parcels tied to the nearby Nevada test site. The Groom Lake parcel's designation was Area 51. The name stuck, not because it was cryptic or symbolic, but because it was bureaucratic. A grid square on an old map became one of the most mythologized place names in American history, almost by accident. Construction moved fast. Within weeks, there was a runway. Within months, the U-2 was flying test missions above the lake bed, watched by a small number of engineers and Air Force personnel, operating under strict, compartmentalized secrecy. A system where even people working on the same base often didn't know what colleagues in the next building were doing. This is where the documented history becomes genuinely fascinating, because Area 51 wasn't built once and left alone. It became the country's premier flight test site for the most advanced and secret aircraft of the next 4 decades. After the U-2 came the A-12 and its more famous successor, the SR-71 Blackbird, an aircraft that could outrun surface-to-air missiles by simply accelerating away from them, and that still holds speed records for a manned, air-breathing aircraft. Both were tested extensively at Groom Lake through the 1960s. In the 1970s and 80s, the base's function expanded again. This is where American engineers tested captured and acquired Soviet fighter jets, flying them in mock combat to understand their strengths and weaknesses. A program so sensitive that pilots involved were forbidden from discussing it for decades. And this is also where stealth technology was born. The Have Blue prototype, and later the F-117 Nighthawk, flew their earliest test flights above Groom Lake in conditions of extraordinary secrecy. For years, the Air Force didn't merely decline to discuss the F-117. It denied the aircraft existed at all, even as witnesses across the Nevada desert reported strange, angular black jets and unexplained sonic booms rattling their windows at night. That pattern, real, documented, revolutionary technology wrapped in flat public denial, is the single most important thing to understand about Area 51. For most of its history, the government's secrecy wasn't about hiding something otherworldly. It was about protecting a multi-billion-dollar technological edge over the Soviet Union during a war that could have gone nuclear. But secrecy has a strange side effect. When an institution refuses to explain anything, people fill that silence with their own explanations. And nowhere did that happen more dramatically than with the testimony of a physicist named Bob Lazar. In 1989, Lazar appeared on a Las Vegas television broadcast and claimed he had worked at a site near Area 51 called S4, reverse engineering the propulsion systems of extraterrestrial spacecraft recovered by the government. He described exotic power sources and gravity manipulation technology far beyond anything publicly known to exist. His claims could not be verified. Reporters were unable to confirm his stated academic credentials at MIT or Caltech, and no independent documentation has ever surfaced to support his employment history as he described it. The government has never confirmed any part of his account. And yet, Lazar's story didn't fade. It exploded, fusing with decades of prior UFO sightings across the Nevada desert and giving Area 51 its modern identity in pop culture. Not a test site, but an alien research facility. It's worth pausing on why so many ordinary people reported strange aircraft in that same stretch of sky for decades. Because the mundane explanation is genuinely well documented. Pilots testing the U-2, the A-12, and later stealth aircraft were flying vehicles with radical new shapes, unfamiliar lighting configurations, and flight characteristics unlike anything the public had ever seen. Declassified CIA histories have since acknowledged that a substantial number of UFO reports across the United States during the Cold War can be traced directly to secret test flights of experimental aircraft, planes flying higher, faster, or stranger than anyone watching from the ground could explain. That doesn't account for every reported sighting near the base, but it does mean that the government's secrecy and the public's UFO reports were, in a real sense, feeding each other. Classified test flights generating strange sightings, and official silence about those flights generating decades of speculation the government refused to correct, because correcting it would have meant admitting the aircraft existed. The base's physical security is itself extensively documented, and it tells its own story. Area 51 is ringed by motion sensors, cameras, and restricted airspace so heavily enforced that pilots are authorized to shoot down unauthorized aircraft entering it, a rare designation shared by very few locations on Earth. Ground access is patrolled by armed private security contractors, sometimes called camo dudes by locals, operating under Air Force authority. Warning signs along the perimeter state plainly that deadly force is authorized. People have been detained, fined, and prosecuted simply for stepping past markers on public roads bordering the site. For decades, the government would not even confirm the base's name in court. In a 1996 lawsuit brought by former workers who alleged they'd been exposed to toxic chemicals from open-air burning of hazardous waste at the site, federal officials fought to avoid acknowledging Area 51 existed at all, citing national security. A presidential exemption was ultimately issued, shielding the Air Force from having to disclose environmental practices there. The workers' claims of illness were never fully resolved in open court, and much of what happened environmentally on the base remains undisclosed to this day. Real acknowledgement finally came in 2013, when the National Security Archive at George Washington University obtained a declassified CIA history of the U-2 program through a Freedom of Information Act request. Buried in its pages, matter-of-factly, was the phrase, Area 51. The first time the United States government had put those words in an official document available to the public. It confirmed what everyone already suspected. The base was real. It had always been about aircraft development, and its official purpose had nothing to do with extraterrestrials. So what does that leave unresolved? Quite a lot, actually. Just not the part most people assume. The base remains active today, and its current programs are, by design, entirely unknown to the public. Satellite imagery available to anyone shows new hangars, expanded runways, and construction that has continued steadily for years. Analysts who study these images can only speculate about what's being tested inside. Likely candidates include advanced drone technology and next-generation aircraft, consistent with the base's entire documented history. But speculation is all any outside observer can offer, because the compartmentalized secrecy that protected the U-2 and the stealth bomber protects whatever comes next. The environmental questions from the 1990s lawsuit were also never fully answered. What exactly was burned in those open pits, and what it may have done to the people who worked there, remains, in large part, classified. And Bob Lazar's claims, whatever you make of them, were never conclusively disproven either. They were simply never proven, and the government's blanket secrecy ensured that no independent investigator could ever fully test them one way or the other. That, more than anything, may be Area 51's real legacy. A secrecy so total and so long-lasting that even after the lies are corrected, the space where they lived never quite empties out. Which leaves one detail that even the 2013 declassification never touched. Somewhere inside that base, right now, sits a program with a name no outsider has ever heard. Because the same wall of silence that once hid the Blackbird and the stealth fighter is, by design, still standing. We only ever learn what Area 51 was hiding decades after it stops mattering. Which means whatever is flying above that dry lake bed tonight won't be declassified in our lifetime, if it ever is at all. If stories like this, real secrets, real silence, and the questions that outlast them, are the kind of mystery that keeps you up thinking, subscribe to The True Unknown and join us for the next one.